Hi, Daryl. Good morning. From a very, very sunny, a bit of a heat wave here in Europe at the moment. And on Brock Island, where I'm now, today's 34 degrees and incredibly hot. But I'm sitting in a nice aircon room and I'm going to chat to you about the Ashes today.
Oh, excellent, Quervus. Very happy for you in that warm climate next to the water where I know you always love being. It's still cool and wet here in Paarl, but good to see you again. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts as well on this big test coming up.
Yeah, Daryl, unfortunately, I don't want to put a damper on it, but I've been chatting to a mate of mine in Manchester, and he
Yeah.
said they forecast rain for Manchester for most of the next 5 days or next week. So it could be one of those tests where it's on and off, typical English conditions, which is probably nice for Jimmy Anderson. It gives him a good chance to play.
Well, Quervus, they announced him in their starting 11. Now, I'll speak under correction. Perhaps he's in the 12, but he's due to play because Robinson's out. But, we were chatting about it last week and saying, well, what are the chances England to win 3 in a row to win the series? And the one point we made was, what about the weather? So it comes as absolutely no surprise to me, on and off. But with these guys, if there's something around, I don't think they need 5 days. It may very well be sort of a 3 or 4 day test match. But it does put England under a lot of pressure now because if there's no result, well, then they have to obviously win the last one to square the Ashes. It just shows, I can tell you from my experience, it just shows you the importance of starting a test series well. If you get the chance, the weather's good, and you get on top of the opposition, you can't just give them an opportunity to come back into the game. And this Australia done the hard work, 2-1 up, and now as we know, England got to do all the running, and the odds are against them. And I've been up in Manchester. I think you would have played a bit of league cricket, club cricket up there. And when it rains there. Eh? It's miserable. Eh?
Yes, I remember. I know we had a club tour there. I went with a team from Scotland, and we played five Lancashire League sides, five
Now, were they?
matches in 5 days.
Of
Yeah.
course, the weather was probably good for you coming from Scotland.
No, I remember at least 3 of the 5 days we were stuck in the Cliffs Hotel in Blackpool. I remember that. No play today. We didn't even bother to go down to the ground. We got the call in the morning, guys, don't bother to stay in the hotel, match cancelled. But anyway, Daryl, also as far as teams that we're talking about Anderson being selected, also if there's a lot of rain forecast, it would influence the Australian team selection, looking at that spinner or maybe the extra seamer with the two all-rounders. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I can't see him being a factor. But in saying that, Moeen Ali, now I don't know, Moeen Ali's playing mind games, but he said, you can't play a test match in Manchester without a spinner. And maybe it's because England want him to play. But no disrespect to him. He's obviously not the worst being as part of that Australian side. But taking the conditions into consideration and the batting depth that a guy like Green gives them, I would go all pace attack and then back yourself to really bowl hard, bowl quick, consistently. We've seen them use the short ball, which has worked effectively with good follow-up lengths, working very well for Australia. So I think it's always going to be a tough call, a brave call under those sorts of conditions. But there's a difference between playing a spinner who's a good one and playing a spinner while conditions suggest you should. Because a poor spinner, even if the conditions are in his favor, I'd rather go with the seamer.
So would you say if Lyons was not injured, whatever the conditions, Lyon would have played?
I think so. No, look, he's the exception. He's out of it. And his absence in the last test match, I think, was significant, Quivers. I mean, he bowls those overs. A quality spinner. And if you go through cricket, perhaps the last 20, 30 years, you go Muralitharan, you go Shane Warne, You go Graham Swan, perhaps, as an example. They could do. You want the spinner to come in to it in the second innings, where the wickets just deteriorated a touch and it's turning. I mean, that's the classic way the game should go on. But a spinner who can, when it's not there, when there's nothing in for him, can still do a holding job. He can tie an end up. And Lyon was pretty good at that, and he picked up wickets. Now, as a captain, if he settled down, and there are periods in the innings, particularly the opposition get in, whether it's first or second innings, where you're confident that, hang on, he's doing a great job there. It means the quicks can run in harder, they can bowl short, sharp spells. So just the balance of the attack, and let's not forget his wicket-taking abilities. No, I would definitely have included Lyon if he was fit.
And then you mentioned Moeen Ali's name. He batted number 3 in the last test. What do you think for everything? I haven't seen that final England 11, unfortunately, but do you know who's going to take that number three batting spot for them?
The talk is that he's going to go in there, which
Again.
I can't seem to make. Maybe it's the best sort of option. Maybe it's a counter-attack option, because he's not good against the short ball. No one's going to convince me that, it's one thing getting underneath the short ball, but it's the follow-up. And then your mind starts playing games with you. You need to be mentally strong, is that you got to put it out of it and deal with it as it comes. You don't want it to affect the rest of your game. And I'm not convinced about Moeen Ali there. I think it's a bit of a hit and miss. If I had my pads on at 4 or 5, I'd keep them on. I wouldn't, as soon as he goes in, I think 4 or 5, they'd 5 pad up as well. But I think the right thing, they've identified, look, let's see when it starts, talk. So again, these teams today, they know they throw in stuff which isn't necessarily going to happen come match day. But Brook at 5, I think that's the right position for him. And then Bairstow, I see they've stayed with him. We speculated about that just over a chat. Will they look to change the pressures on him? So the style of play, and look, he's done it before, hasn't he, Quirvis? I mean, he's played some brilliant knocks, but it's his keeping, which is the key factor here. And had he taken catches, all that came his way, I wonder if it wouldn't have been a case of 2-1 to Australia, because there's a strong argument for that.
The one thing we also chatted about later is at this stage of the series, with this test, obviously a make or break, especially I would say Australia, I think, would love to wrap up the series with this test and not leave it to the last test. England's got everything to play for. They don't want to lose the test series with a test to go. So I think probably what you're obviously going to stick to what these guys have been playing 3 tests. Most of them's got the 3 tests behind their belt, except the fast bowlers that they rotated on both sides. You, in your own experience in a series like this, in the days when you toured, you guys, I remember watching you in 1994, that series, where you get the county games in between, where you play a test and there may be 2 county games. I remember very clearly quite a funny incident there. When you toured there, remember I traveled with a team for a while, and when they played minor counties in Torquay, you had a game there. And Pat Simcox at the time, I think, was sort of a touch and go for the next test. And he then scored, if I remember correctly, he scored 100 in Torquay. And I remember that evening I went out with you guys and they were going to announce the side for the next test that evening. And Hansie Cronje apparently said to Pat, after that 100, Pat, just keep knocking on that door. And Pat Simcox looked at him, and I'll never forget it. He said, well, the only knocking on my door is when you come to tell me I'm not playing the next day. I'm 12th man. But I do think in those, I remember your own case very clearly, where you scored runs in those games between the test, and then you got your opportunity at the Oval when you scored that 94. Nowadays, the tours are very different. It's there's no other cricket. It's you go from
Yes.
test into the next test. That obviously plays a big role in test selections of your sides. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Quibus. It's quite sad because I recall that series at the end of it with all those games. I played in the third test that it was about 2 seasons that I would have played in South Africa. And they don't have, though, the questionable selections. Do they keep going with Warner? Do they keep going with Bairstow? Okay, Warner, they're the touring side. And he's probably will play because someone now coming in who's just had been in the nets for all this time, is he necessarily going to be a better player? So he doesn't have anything to work with to say, hang on, I'm in good form. And I had on the back of about, I think it was 5 or 6 50s in those games. And I think we had 2 games between each test match, and we had 3 before the first test match. Against quality opposition, there were county sides, and that led to me being selected for the last test match. Maybe they had an eye on the future, but I played a good innings there, which I think bought me a bit of time. But and having played county cricket there, and obviously having toured there, a good amount of cricket in England only does your game the world of good. And I think that's something that countries don't recognize. Let's go back in time. Let's look at that great. Let's use case example the West Indies. That great side, where they sort of kicked in mid 70s after probably 77, 78 when they, and then they virtually, I think they lost what, 1 test or 2 tests till about the early 90s. Man for man, all those guys learned their trade in county cricket. Greenwich, Haynes later on, Vivian Richards for 15, 16 years, Clive Lloyd playing for Lancashire, Roberts, Holding. Some spent more than others. Now, today, that doesn't exist. Viv Richards, when he came on a trial, he went to Surrey, Quibus, and they didn't take him on as an 18, 19-year-old because the coach there said, listen, he can't hit the ball through the offside. He had to pack his bags. He then had to go at Somerset. They took him on board. Our era, the 90s, go through that Australian side. Mark Waugh played 10, 11, 12 seasons for Essex. Steve Waugh played 3 or 4 seasons in county cricket. I think Somerset for a period. So Matthew Hayden, Langer. You go through all of them. Warren played later on in his career. McGrath, I think might have played as a kid, played up in the Lancashire League. So all the best. And I remember Jacques Callis saying that he spent 2 years at the start of his career at Middlesex. He says those were 2 of the most important years of his cricket because you learn also to become a pro. You take on the responsibility. You learn to manage your game and better, and as you go around the country. And this, today, it doesn't happen anymore. And I think it's impacted tremendously, particularly on the batters from all around the world. That gap. Okay, there's other reasons we could unpack a whole lot. But I think that's one of the factors which does not get recognized enough over the last 10, 15 years. The impact of county cricket has done on the last 30, 40 years. Name the great players. Lara came on the back of 375 at 3-4 seasons, got that 400, 500. Tendulkar played 1 season in Yorkshire, but he's kind of an exception. You can go through all of them. Martin Crowe, you can go through them. And, now to tour, you don't even get the option of that either. And I think, and Mike Atherton was one years back, wrote about don't have the English in county cricket. We must go back to, he went as far as to say, perhaps uncovered pitches. He definitely said that we should not have overseas players. For the simple reason, what I've just gone on about for the last few minutes is that it did so much for their games. And when they came to England, they would thump us because they were so, particularly Australia, they were so accustomed to the conditions. They played more cricket there, go through all of it, they played more cricket there, the nucleus of that great side, than they did at home. Now, I can't help thinking that maybe, the absence of all of that, because the schedule has just become so busy now. How many guys you see playing a full county season from any other country around the world? They don't anymore. They come in for T20 bash, maybe a few 50 over games. And in 4-day cricket, they're few. Labuskaghni was with Glamorgan. I think he's been, but I don't think he's played a full season. I think he was signed up this year, and then they replaced him because of the Ashes series. So, and I think it's obviously done a lot for England's performances, particularly at home. So, that's still the cradle of where the game gets played and learnt. Maybe not so much anymore, but it's had a massive impact on many careers playing in England.
Oh yeah, I mean yourself. You didn't mention yourself. You played a season for Kent. You had a season for Derbyshire.
Yeah. I played in '95 for Derbyshire, and we never really used to see the ball swing in South Africa. The Kookaburra used to swing, whilst it was new. But so that was one thing that troubled me in the beginning, that I felt that I wanted to become better at. Through a whole season in England, the ball swings every day. It swings all the time. You got the old county pro. You swing it out, and you bring one back, and you bowl a slow ball, and they bowl hard at you for a while. Then they're going to a break. He's counting how many overs he's still got left in the season. So you had key periods, you had to work through them. But one season in Derbyshire, it wasn't a bit of a mental block for me anymore. So that was a massive, massive value. And I mean, I had the chance to go as an 18-year-old. Middlesex offered me a contract, but that was 86, 87. No, we weren't in international cricket. So there was no hope of that. So I thought, well, I'm better off trying to study, learn a trade, and because there's no what's the long-term future in trying to play county cricket. I tell you today, it's my biggest regret cricket-wise. I should have taken the opportunity, because I studied and ended up with not much of a degree, passed it, but not much. But now that's life. We must move on. But I can't help thinking what a massive impact it would have had on my game.
Yeah, Delby, I'm thinking you mentioned these Australians and that, but if you look at the South African cricketers during that period where we were not playing international cricket, I mean, Clive Rice at Derbyshire, Mike Proctor at Gloucestershire,
Yeah.
you can go through the list. The two
Alan
Smith
Donald.
brothers, Alan Donald, Warwickshire. I mean, these guys, Peter
Yeah.
Kirsten at Derbyshire. I mean, in those days, these guys I think they came up against players that they've only read about, and maybe
Yeah.
if they were lucky, seen on TV, and then all of a sudden you're out there playing county cricket for Derbyshire, Peter Kirsten, for instance, and you're facing Andrew Roberts at Hampshire. It was an unbelievable opportunity
Yeah.
for these guys to at least show their worth. Barry Richards
Yeah.
at Hampshire.
Yeah. But I think, if we just keep it at our area, if I could call it that. Now, I mean, Alan Donald, we played South African schools together in 1984. He was 12th man, in fact. He went straight within that following season. He made his way into England and then got signed up by Warwickshire. And he just kept coming back every year, a better quick bowler, faster and faster. And I mean, he was an absolute machine, Alan. I mean, 12 years, a season year, a county season, and then the introduction of international cricket. When that was still happening, he was back playing county cricket. It's phenomenal, the impact that it had on his game. And you can ask him. He was a big jump, open action as a 17, 18-year-old. That action that you saw today, it was way off as a kid at 17, 18. And with the help of Bob Woolmer, he molded and got that action. And just bowled overs. And he just bowled overs. Alan wasn't a guy for the gym. He wasn't a guy going on long runs. He was proper bowling fit. And I know he would tell you that without that continual cricket all year round, and what county cricket offered him, and one of the great fast bowlers of all time. I don't think anybody can dispute that.
So, yeah, I was thinking as well now while we're talking. We mentioned Kent there. I remember you obviously played a lot of cricket with and probably against Roy Pienaar, Vitas, uh,
Yes, yes,
and,
yes. I played
and
more against him in South Africa.
uh,
He was a little bit older than me. He's your age, I think. Roy's about your age. You would have
yes,
seen Roy
yes.
play. I played quite a bit against him. He was a marvelous all-rounder. It's just a pity, his knees didn't allow him to bowl more overs. But I mean, he was when he was at his best as a youngster, he was world class. He was a world class all-rounder. I think perhaps with the
No, I brought
interest
his
of
name.
carry on.
No, I just I recall a story when I was playing club cricket in Kent, and on the it was a weekday game, and I wasn't playing club cricket. We had our games on weekends, so I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. And Roy was a big mate of mine from Cape Town, University of Cape Town. I played quite a bit of cricket there with Roy, and Roy said, come to the county ground, come and they were playing Hampshire, and he said, it's gonna be quite an experience for me to face Malcolm Marshall and come and have a watch. So I went down there. The Kent openers, Mark Benson and Neil Taylor open, they put up almost to
Yes,
200 opening partnership on a flat Canterbury wicket. They obviously knew they play Hampshire with Marshall there. And Roy was going to be batting at 4. So he sat there till like almost tea time with the pads on, and nothing came up higher than waist high. So I was sitting in the players' box next to Roy, and then eventually Roy got in, and he walked. He started walking with his Kent cap on. He walked out. He turned around and he said to me, "Hey, Quibby, do you think I should put the lid on?" And Roy always batted just with the earpieces. I never saw him bat with the
mm.
full face. So he had this white helmet, and I'll never forget. I said, "Roy, it's still Malcolm Marshall. Take your helmet." So he came back, took the helmet, and Roy's first over he faced Malcolm came back uh, for a spell later on, also against a new batsman, and he bowled 6 balls to Roy Pienaar, and Roy. I think it was hit on the glove. He was hit on the side, on the back of the helmet. He turned his back on one. He gloved another one just over slips, and he didn't get back to ball on one of the 6 balls. And then he didn't face the next over. And the next over, he faced Malcolm. Marshall got him out, gloved it, caught behind for a duck. And Roy came out and he was literally shell shocked. He walked into the dressing room. I walked in. I said, "Jeez, Roy, I haven't seen that. Where did that came from with the old ball on that wicket?" And Roy said, "Yeah, I haven't faced anything like that before." And after the game, the guys went out to the local pub there next to Canterbury. I forgot the name of the pub. Players always used to go there. And the guys were talking. And Roy asked Malcolm Marshall, he said, what happened there? And Malcolm said, "I wanted to spread the legend because you're going to go back to South Africa. You're not playing international cricket. South African batters hasn't faced me. And for me, it was an opportunity to spread my legend in South Africa." And I thought, what a nice story, giving that over, to Roy Pienaar. And I remember that very clearly. We're talking about South Africans in
Mm.
county cricket. Um,
Mm, mm, mm.
yeah,
Yeah, he was known. Remember, he came at the end of his career. Marshall, he came to South Africa, and he was supposed to come to. I was playing at Transvaal, and Eddie Barlow was the coach in his first year, and Jimmy Cook had lined up Marshall to come play for us, and Barlow in his first year said no, and he then went to Natal, and he played there for 3 years. But the first game back when we were at the Wanderers, if we'd won the game, I think we were going to win the trophy. And he bowled us out. One man bowled us out. He bowled 23 overs from the caller drive end, and he did the same in the second innings. He got 5 and 5 to prove a point. 23 overs. Yeah. So anyway, that was the end of that chat. So he had a point to prove. Yeah, it was a sad loss. I think it was early 40s, eh?
yes, yes,
40s he passed away. Yeah.
yeah. Well, just quickly returning to the Ashes, always interesting for me. I mean, whenever the Ashes comes up, I was privileged enough to watch that innings that Botham played, the 149 at Headingley. I was there. And
Sure.
these kind of individual performances, and in this series so far, the 3 tests we've had some fantastic individual performances. I mean, uh, uh, I think of Stokes first of all, that the innings he's played. Do you want to just maybe some of the performances in this series so far that stood out for you?
Well, I think that is, it's been a series where you haven't seen one team put it all together for a full 5 days. You know what I mean? There's been individual brilliance. Kawaja, you've had Cummins, you've had Stokes, you had Brook, which towards in that second dig for England. And that's been noticeable for me. Then on the other extreme, you've had guys that were really touted to do well. A Warner, for example, that's battled. That number 3 spot for England. They've had some starts up front. It hasn't really happened there. And I think if you had to look at a unit in those first 2 tests, I thought the Australian attack was a pretty good unit. Then they lost Nathan Lyon. And I think that trend will continue, Quivers, for this test match, how much cricket they play. But the one thing that might even upset that individual performances even more is I have a thought, and there's a thought I had before the series started, that I think England should take Australia on wickets that are doing something. At the seamers, they should leave something. Now, overhead conditions, that just may be the case in Manchester now. Because that Australian top 4 or 5, when the ball's doing something off the pitch, not through the air, with Labuschagne and Steve Smith, they were right in front of their stumps, and out of form Warner, who's really battling, it it could work well. And England, my other thought was that bat deep. That's why I'm a bit worried about Ali being at 3. I would have liked him where at 7, 8, 9, 10. Because in those sorts of pitches, those 40, 50 runs in the end play a massive role in you actually winning the test match. But I mean, the standout has obviously been Kawaja. I mean, the way that he's played. I mean, the last 2 years, he's averaged. Funny enough, this test match was when he got dropped on his last tour of England. And then, they took a break from him. And then since, well, it's been 18 months now, I think, he's come back. He's averaged over 60, eh?
Yeah.
And I think the big thing is that you can argue, well, he's done very well at home, but he's taken it overseas. He's taken it in the subcontinent. He's taken that form into England. And that's what you want. You don't want to be recognized as, oh, well, you're a good player at home. I mean, the best has been Jai Wardner. Everyone hails as a modern great and backwards and forwards. And do yourself a favor, go look at his out of the subcontinent. Go look at his test record. You'll be quite amazed. So, those are the things you look for. Have batters around the world when they are considered. And he's been the best test batsman now for 2 years. And he's taken it. So, can he continue with that? So, I think this is what makes it quite exciting. And then you've got Stokes. I mean, how good a cricketer is that guy? You at Headingley, you watch both of them. I've got a question for you. Who would you go for, Stokes or both of them?
Well, I think,
As an
yeah.
English, well, forget about classing them as an English all-rounder, a world all-rounder, test all-rounder.
But I would always look at Botham for me was your classical all rounder. Go and blaze 100, especially his record against India was phenomenal. But he had, unfortunately, I don't know the stats here. I should have looked, but I know he's got quite a few fivers. So Botham, I think, as a bowling all rounder as well. On the bowling side, I would say definitely. Don't think Stokes is really in the same league as Botham with a ball in hand, but as a batsman, I mean, Stokes probably as good or maybe just a bit better. His face Stokes as well, so is Botham. Such a difficult one, but I will still say for me, Botham a little bit more of a bowling all rounder as well. That can be devastating with a bat. Whereas Stokes, I see more as a batsman that bowls as well. I think he's had some injuries problems lately, so that obviously is a big factor.
Yeah, I think the thing with all-rounders I've found is when they get in runs, they're always reluctant to bowl. But yes, he has had a few injury problems. I think he's not quite there yet, Stokes. So another 2-3 years of good test cricket, captaining, then it's going to be, I think, then be a big call because Look, there's the thing about both of them. I mean, the charisma, the icon, the player. I mean, he captured world cricket's attention like very few probably in the history of the game. Where Stokes, I don't think's in spoken of or kind of revered or had those brilliant moments. Although he's had one or two, Botham's Ashes is legendary. But I think if he looks to do more with the ball over time now, look, Botham had that West Indies attack to deal with. So he's, against the best of the day, he wasn't good with the ball, but he was renowned for bowling some quick spells. I think at the moment you probably got to go for both them all round. I agree with you. But if Stokes can keep together really good winning Test match performances, he I think he might just in the end put both them for England's greatest all rounder. I think some might argue there already because batting, I think he's a better bet than both of them. And I think technically he's a sound player. He's a phenomenal cricketer. And and he also puts bums on seats. Let's not forget that. When I always remember someone saying when both of them went out to bat, there was no one at the beer tent in England. No one ordering a beer or some pims. They were all on seats. And isn't that what it's about? And that's kind of cricket that England are playing at the moment. Some have, controversial views about Baz cricket and Bazball and that type of thing. But it's led by Stokes. So a captain that's playing well, that's confident, is a big plus to a test team because that definitely just rubs off on everybody else. So whilst Australia might have won the first and second, England came back. The talk is still England. You know what I mean? The talk is still all about England, baseball, this and that. And isn't that also what it's about? I mean, they're packing them in. People want to see because they know. I don't think it's so much about baseball being attacking, and they were a bit measured in the last innings in the previous Test match in terms of trying to play better Test cricket. But I think it's the mindset of we want to win. And it's almost, I think, kind of thinking ahead of themselves. Now, in the old days, you played a Test match, so you got into position where you can't lose, then you try to win. So it's almost like you sense, well, we're going to need 60 overs tomorrow, at least 70 overs to bowl opposition out. To get the runs on the board today in the last session, we need to go at 5 and over. And if we don't and we get bowled out so well, we were never going to win, which is not really an issue for them, I feel. I think they want to play the sort of cricket that people want to watch. And we'll go into this Test match, we'll go into the last one, and everyone will still be talking about England. Whereas when Australia arrived in the past, in the 90s and early 2000s, all the talk was Australia. Every paper, how good and brilliant and wonderful they are. So Australia might win it, but the talk will all be about England. Do you agree?
100%, Daryl. Absolutely. That's all. I know. I've been following this Ashes, and all the time I'm looking at that. Most of the time at that England players, and although Australia won has won the first two tests, I was looking at Root, at Stokes, and then Wood that came back in the last
Oh God, we haven't spoken
test.
about him.
So I've been very much looking at England, exactly as you said. What do you think? Mentioning Wood, it made a huge difference, didn't it?
I tell you, and he's
Big
not a
impact.
big guy. He's not a tall sort of guy, but hell, I tell you, he bowled quickly, man, and consistently on a pitch which you wouldn't describe that sort of pitch as being wow, his pace and bounce here. I just thought at times that he overcooked the short ball. I'd like to see him hold back a bit in terms of pace. And then his follow up lengths, just giving a few more of those, and then varying that bouncer pace. I thought he just got a bit too predictable with that. And I think by perhaps following the approach I'm speaking about, he may, get himself an extra 2-3 overs. And I think this is why England have been very sparing in their use of him and the amount of cricket he's playing, because to generate that sort of pace and what he puts into it, you can't be doing that all year round, can you? I mean, it's just not possible. But man, I tell you, it was fantastic to see a guy running in like that and just, as they say, letting it go. I think he would have scared the hell out of any batter.
You were talking about, you can't talk about all rounders. We talked about Stokes and we talked about Botham. As a South African, I have to bring this up. Jacques Kallis. If you throw his name in there, Jacques Kallis, you're talking about Botham with the charisma. Jacques Kallis was a more sort of quiet guy, I think, maybe not the most charismatic player, but what a all rounder. I mean, his statistics, his record speaks for itself.
Absolutely. I mean, they're big statistics over a long period of time. He took on loads of responsibility. Uh, Legend of the game, a great, a certain pick in maybe an all-time 11 at 6 or 7. He held his own. I thought during his period, for a long period when he was at his best, technically the best defense, better than Tendulkar's, better than Dravid. Now, what's wonder if he'd played more Test cricket in India? I think he would have averaged over 60 with the bat. Um, Bowl his overs. The start, he was quick. I mean, I stood slip all his cricket that I played with him. And 99 World Cup, 98, 99, 2000, he was bowling quickly at pace and swinging it away. And then he kind of settled down into that massive role that he played. Genuine all-rounder, bat or bowl in any team. And he was a good catcher. My only thing about him is, I say to people, give me a callous moment. Give, give me a callous moment. He played 6 World Cups. He didn't make an impact on one. Did not go look at his cricket. He never made an impact on one World Cup. People argue the greatest cricketer ever. 6. Imagine Sobers, both them, a Hadley, a Couple Dev. Let's go, a Clive Rice. He played, real quality all rounders with the bat. But I mean, that was, Jacques' game was just built around consistency. And there was a lot of consistency in that man's cricket.
Well, then you mentioned the name Clive Rice now, one of my
Yeah.
all-time favorite cricketers. Used to love the New Year's game at Newlands for a period of about 8 years. My Stellenbosch days, that I wouldn't miss that for the world. Uh, Clive Rice, Eddie Barlow, captains, all-rounders. You played under Clive Rice, or with you played with Clive Rice
I,
and under Eddie Barlow as a coach.
yeah, I played under Eddie as a coach. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bunter, you talk about charisma. I mean, what a charismatic cricketer
yeah,
he was. You did as well, didn't you? When you were at Stellenbosch, he was the coach there, wasn't he?
yeah.
He used to
I
say
had
that,
Eddie there.
I'll
Yes.
tell you, Quibus, he never, ever, I had 2 years, 3 years at Transvaal, he was our coach. He had a nickname for everybody. He never, ever once called me by my name. Never. I was either batsman, well, he had this, I don't know. I never asked him, Daniel. He used to call me Daniel. I have no idea why he called me Daniel. To this day, I don't know why. But even when I saw him in England late, early 2000s, he was in a wheelchair then. He was, Daniel. Hello, Daniel. He came to a game. It was a knockabout somewhere. He'd come along to watch. But wow, he had a massive impact on a lot of careers. The young guys, you'd remember him, wouldn't you, when there was young Kirsten,
Yes.
Roo, uh, and
Couple of
making their way,
vessels.
Kepler making their way through university cricket, and Bunter was there. Yeah, what a he was a tremendous guy. I loved playing under him.
Yeah, as you said there, with the younger players, I know he had a reputation for, not to say he didn't coach well with older players, but I think his strength. We all have our strength, and Eddie's had a gift for working with young players. I mean, I look when I had him at Stellenbosch University when he coached us there. I was in my first year as a young 18-year-old, and Eddie was already in his 40s. But when you're with Eddie, the way he used to talk to you, he used to go take us on that bergpad for a run, and Eddie would be running in the front with young students behind him. Eddie in his 40s, huffing and puffing, red in his face, but Eddie led from the front. I remember at Stellenbosch as well, when we had nets there, a young Garth LaRue, Evan Gordon. I mean, these guys were sharp. In those indoor nets, the ball used to fly, and Eddie would always, he had his kit there, he would bat first. Eddie had a knock. and then he'll go and coach and stand behind, walk around. But he just had a fantastic influence. And you look at that young team at Stellenbosch, and we had a young Donnie de Toey, Adrian Kuiper, Kirsten Wessels, LaRue, as you mentioned. These guys all went on to become great players, and the role
Yeah.
that Eddie played. And then he had a stint in Free State, where he also took a young
Yeah.
Free State team. Remember that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he left Gauteng, and then he went down there, and Hansie Cronje just become captains. You had a Donald, you had a Cronje. I mean, they had a top team, a Corey van Zyl, they had a useful batting lineup. I mean, they sort of early 90s, late
Yeah.
80s, early 90s was the team to beat in South African cricket.
Yeah.
And, you know, he, he just fitted the whole idea that Hansie had about cricket. 6 o'clock batting in the nets. Eddie worked started at sunrise and he finished at sunset. And that is how he worked as a coach. So you could just imagine the influence that he had there. And it was just so right for Hansie because Eddie was all about go and the team as well and pulling them together. And when Hansie became captain of South Africa, which I think was 95, I tell you, he campaigned hard to have Eddie as our coach. And I'm sorry that he never became our coach because Ali Bacha fancied Bob Wilmer, and Bob Wilmer got the job. And, Bacha and Bala hated each other. I mean, there was no love lost there. And that was probably primarily the reason why Eddie never got the job. Yeah, he were two teammates and he would have had their issues and fallout. But Hansie tried harder. He would love to have had, and I think it would have been amazing traveling, the world playing cricket with Eddie Bala as your coach. And wherever he went, he reminds me of Ray Jennings in these times. Not some more. I mean, Ray doesn't coach anymore. Wherever he went, he had a massive impact. He got teams winning. That province team, he came to us. He got us winning. He played. He played. It was Derbyshire, wasn't he? He got them winning.
Yeah.
And that to me is the sign of a good coach that can turn a place around and take with not much talent, get it winning, believing, and playing the sort of cricket that's winning cricket. And he was one of those characters. Yeah, you mentioned perhaps the senior players, they eventually might just have a bit too much as they become established. But I often say that shouldn't be the reason. If you're playing good cricket and he's influential, as much as he's got to work with you, you may have coach might have his issues with you. You've got to also learn to work with a coach. But no, what a wonderful guy, and still spoken about, I guess, particularly in county cricket, like Mark Proctor would be, Barry Richards through the years. I mean, they're still legends, those guys.
No, Clive Rice, you played in Gauteng under Clive Rice as your captain. Also, I mean, absolute legend. What he did at Notts is legendary. They'll never forget
Yeah.
him in Nottinghamshire. Your own views on playing under Clive Rice?
Girls, I speak under correction, yeah, but I played one season with him. And then then Eddie came along. And Eddie wanted to move on. And then Clive left. And yeah, he was captain then. You're right. But he was right towards the end. Man, a few words. He liked to take the ball and he played in that mean machine, which if I think back, that mean machine with all the cricket that was going on today would have been as good as any test team, if not better than any test team. You just had to go through the names. And that was still, okay, I was a young guy at 18, 19, 20 playing against them. They're a lot younger, less experienced. And these are guys that you grew up watching in South African cricket. And, Clive led from the front. That was his great attribute. Uh, Genuine batting all-rounder. They'll tell you in his young days he was quick. He'd hit guys. At times I faced him. I think he just knew he just had to be consistent as against a youngster like me outside Rostam. He nicked me off. And then at the Wonders one game, he bowled me a bouncer. Then I could see where his reputation of having a very good bouncer came from. Because he was same action, right over the top, dropping it in. There wasn't that type of thing. And he, there was always the ding dong battle, which then went onto the racetrack, because him and Garth Leroux started the celebrity car racing stuff. And that became Ricey's, God, when you played at the Wanderers, right outside the changing room, he used to park his racing car there. And all he used to talk about was racing cars. And I think he was the first guy in South African cricket to wear, dark, these shades, and they were funny looking things, which I think he wore in his race car. It was, and they used to televise these things. And you speak to the guys who were beyond race, motor racing. They hated these buggers. Both of them used to come there, and one guy was saying they'd write off about 2-3 cars. They didn't know how to drive, but they were big north and south, big personalities, Leroux and Rice. And the story goes at Newlands, Transvaal batted first, and Garth. Just remember, he was 76-7, Packer series, man of the series, eh? Man of the series, the 2 series. You had Holding, you had Roberts, you had the world's best there. And he was quick, and he was a mean bugger. He was a mean bugger, Garth Leroux. And he bounced Ricey, and there was all this, the crowd, and Ricey was enemy number one. He'd make a statement before they arrived in Cape Town. We had to beat these mountain goats. Just give us 2 days. And he stirred a huge pot there on Clive Rice, and Garth bounced him, and then eventually Ricey said to him, "Just remember one thing: I don't miss." And now Leroux comes to bat. Ricey, in that classic Marshall mode, give me the ball. And he ran in and he hit him straight in the gob. Straight in the gob. And I could appreciate just that one ball I saw from him, that bouncer. He had an action which you wouldn't coach today. He had that running. He's running like this, remember. He had this massive, I've never seen a bowler. He had this massive gather, who was literally on the outside of his back foot, on the edge of his boot, on his back foot, and then big land on the front foot, and through. Today it's all run forward, jump forward. Unbelievable. So from that moment, he's like a catapult, but it was over the top, the bouncer. And he hit him straight in the gob. Said, I don't miss. They played the cricket. I think our cricket was similar. Hey? Today it's so different. I feel sorry for the guys that, they're so closely watched, and cameras and commentators and 20-odd cameras in a top production. They almost sort of got to be well behaved. There's none of that. Bowlers can't, say too much, and they've got to run around the batsman, and you've got match referees, and those days it was left to the umpire. The umpires sorted it out. And you know what? You didn't have too much bullshit with the umpires. You didn't. They sorted it out. First sign of trouble, a little bit of an actor, and go straight to the match referee, and guys get, no, it's still, it's still the bull ring. That was the Wanderers. The bull ring, the matadors, bull coming at them. It's argy-bargy. It's fun. It's the heat of the moment, No, we don't see that anymore, do we?
Totally. Exactly what you're talking about now makes me think, talking about the bull ring, the matador, Brian McMillan, when he played for the English and then later for Province. I mean, what a player Brian Mack was.
Well, Quibus, Mac to me, probably that I've played against and played with, probably the best cricketer. I'm going to stick my neck out. That's how good I thought he was. And international cricket saw him, he was as quick as a 19, 21, 22-year-old, bowled a heavy ball. Also bowled a bad bouncer. He used to hit guys with that bouncer. Batted, I think he didn't give himself enough credit. Best slip catcher I played with. And I'm at 56 now. I think I can start to talk about one of the best ever. And when you start 40, 50 years of, you've watched more cricket than me, you tell me. I can remember in 7 seasons playing cricket with him, domestic cricket and for South Africa, dropping 2 catches. One was at the Oval, and one was at late evening at Newlands. No one could catch a ball like him. He scored buckets. I mean, he had massive. And he played at Transvaal, then he came down to Province. Remember the first game? I fielded second slip because Most of the balls generally go to second slip. And I've been playing for Province for like 3, 4 seasons. I went to second slip. He said, no, no, no. You go to first. He stood at second. I wasn't going to argue with him. I thought it was a bit sort of offsides, but I'm not going to argue with him. And he just stood there at second slip, eh? And he was an unbelievable catcher. But yeah, I think, he'd have burst on the scene at international cricket at 19, just as a bowler. And then he, also played county cricket, played for Warwickshire, had that experience, and that also helped shape his game. But what a fine cricketer Mac was. What a fine cricketer. I don't think he's never been given the true credit for the quality of cricket that he played.
Talking about that guy that doesn't always get the accolades, and I often look at wicket keepers, and I mean, standing in the sun, sometimes you're in the field in a test for 2 days, and the keeper just doing his job there, and he only really gets noticed if he drops a few or he lets a lot of buys
Yeah.
through. When he takes them all and no buys go through, nobody mentions the keeper, and then. Quite interesting for me. I had a season of club cricket in Derbyshire, and I was Derbyshire 12th man once. And Bob Taylor was the keeper. And I mean, he batted number 10, I think. He was a specialist keeper. And I always just thought, what a keeper. And he sort of lived in the shadow of Alan Knott. And everybody, I mean, Knott was a great, but Taylor, some people in England that I spoke to at Derbyshire asked Fred Swabrook, that was playing at Derbyshire, old county pro once. And he said, as a glovesman, Taylor was probably the better keeper than Notty. And then I look at, he kept at Bob Taylor would have, I think even for Derbyshire, he batted very low down the order. He batted maybe at 9. And a few games he played for England, batted low down the order. And then I thought very similar. I played a lot of club cricket with and against, and I did a lot of sessions training with Richie Ryle. He always used to call me, could we come and do some keeping training? I thought Richie was a fantastic wicket keeper. And then sort of with Ray Jennings that could bat as well. Some people I spoke to said Ray Jennings, fantastic keeper, stood quite far back, and Richie never went back that far. You played with both standing at second slip. Just talking about Ray Jennings a bit, and then Richie Ryle as a keeper.
Ray's the best gloveman that I played with and I've seen.
Yeah.
I think he was phenomenal. He the one question mark standing up really only really stood to Alan Curry because that was one of the only spinners we really
Yeah.
had in South African cricket. But I have no doubt around the world he would have established himself. And then when Alan Knott came on those rebel tours, early 80s, and Alan Knott himself said that Ray was the best keeper in the world. Richie, was a full-time professional as well. So I have no doubt that in today's times, they both would have played for South Africa. I can imagine Richie then fully dedicated to his keeping and cricket. And remember, Bala picked him in his first game for Western Province as an opening batsman.
I was there.
Yeah.
I watched it.
Is it?
As an
Yeah.
opening bat against the Transvaal Mean Machine as a youngster club cricketer from nowhere.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, Richie got a pair as an opening bat in that game.
Yeah. So you had the potential, but again, a fine glove man.
Yeah.
You go back to Knott and Bob Taylor, and you hear them talk about keeping. And Jack Russell was another one, and you often listen to them and who they acknowledge as someone whose technique and game they followed. And a lot of guys will talk of Bob Taylor as that sort of guy. But it opens up again the debate today where you've seen keepers being selected on their batting, and Bairstow is a good example. And what do you pick the keeper for? To not drop 5-6 catches, make half chances into big wickets, and the batting, are we picking him for that? And do you in Test cricket say, hang on, he's a keeper first, and then he bats? But in today's game, the way that it's gone, and T20 and 50 over cricket and cricket around the world, it's the guys who can bat. And I guess the guy that started it, and there's probably one or two before then, was Gilchrist. So you can acknowledge him as good an all-rounder as someone who bowls. He was a phenomenal cricketer. Look at his strike rate, Quiz. His strike rate in Test cricket, and he didn't play 5 or 10. He might have played 100. His strike rate is over 90, and top keeper. And that's the trend today. So I don't know what you think. In a series like this, I'm inclined to think take a specialist keeper. That's why they were keen to play Folks, weren't they? And if you
Well,
look at the
and he's
you
a
look
hell
at
of a
the
good batsman as well, folks.
yeah,
Sorry, but folks can bat as well. But obviously not in the Bairstow, probably not in the Bairstow league as a batter. But
if Besta puts down a couple more now, it'll be one of the things they'll look back on the series and say that was a mistake. But then he's played in other series. I think the problem too, what's caught up with him, he broke his leg. And listening to those that know, they talk about he's not moving well behind the stumps. And that's affected. So has he been fit enough to really keep? And it's cost England, eh? It's cost them dearly.
well, if again, I have to bring my South African angle in. Uh, Mark Boucher, you
Yeah,
probably played all your career. No, you probably started off playing with Swinger with Dave Richardson, but you must have played
yeah.
a lot of your cricket with Bouch as well. Those two as keeper batters.
I would have put Boucher ahead of Richardson. Similar in terms of their keeping. Yeah, Boucher played a long time. He was influential, but steady at most. Steady, competent, good keeper, good batting. He was also, as a youngster, he was a batter who kept. And then,
Yeah.
to his credit, when Richardson came to his end, and there was a guy, Nick Pothis, who was in the running. And Nick was at the inside lane because he was a Ray Jennings protege. And the difference between the two was that, and I was playing with Nick, and I said to him, if you want to challenge, because Nick at times opened the batting, he was a top 4 batter, and then he took his keeping seriously. He wouldn't take that. He wouldn't stay up there. He'd fit it into the sort of the keeper position of batting 6 or 7. Whereas Boucher, as a kid, started his provincial career, batted in the top 4. And tell you, that's what got him in the South African team be ahead of Pothis, was he got runs. And credit to Boucher, he stuck his hand up and said, that's my way in. And Pothis was reluctant, and I think it cost him.
Well, I think
Yeah,
to
Quibus.
sort of finish our podcast on
Yeah,
just on this with the Test series going back to the Ashes. That's the big one at the moment. Australia 2-1 up, 2 tests to go. You want to make a call? Who's going to win the series? What's your feeling if you look at the teams? England
well,
winning 3 in a row, probably a bit tough ask.
if put yourself in the Australian camp, and I think most would say, oh, we don't mind if it rains, we 2-1 up. But then are you here to go and then lose the last test and square the series, having won the first 2? So Australia must want to play. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. Lose, it doesn't matter. You with me? It's all down to then the third, which either way is either going to be a drawn series. Do you want to go there and draw the series? Well, I suppose it's better than losing it. But I think both teams, obviously England got to look to play. But I think, funny enough, if it rains out, the best in England can come out of this is a drawn series. You know what I'm trying to say? So, and they'll say 2 down, we came back to level the series. That's as good as winning it. And we're at home. But do you want to lose a series at home? So Australia are the ones, as we say, England want to make the running. If I was Australia, I definitely want to get on the park and try and win it now. And not after being 2 up, potentially see yourself, squaring the series. So I'm going to go. I think the weather may play a role in the last one. I still say I think I'm going to go with Australia.
So,
At best, England are going to do is square the series. And if they get enough cricket in, my best chance for England is if there's definitely something in the pitch. And I'll just leave a bit of grass in there and not back yourself to knock this Australian side over.
Yeah, I think. I mean, they're just such good players. Labuskaghni and Smith. Labuskaghni probably a bit more due for a big one. Somewhere he's going to come good. So Australia there, but then also Wood for me made such a big difference in that
Yeah.
last test to the
Yes,
bowling side. So that could maybe the England bowling unit could be the key for the next two tests.
absolutely. Well, let's wait and see, Quibby.
Yeah,
It's been good chatting again. Let's have a chat perhaps after this test. See
yeah.
where we are.
Absolutely, Daryl. Before that
Okay.
last test in the Ashes, we'll have a chat. Thank you so much, Daryl. Have a
Great
lovely
pleasure,
day. Thanks
Quibbles.
for chatting.
You too.
Cheers, Daryl.
Cheers,
Bye
then.
bye.
Bye now.
Cheers, mate. Bye bye, Daryl.